Hello and welcome. You're viewing the Citizens Journalist podcast, Mesa County Compass, that brings you the news that you can use from a different point of view. I'm Ruth.
I'm Lisa.
And together we are Mesa County Compass. Our goal is to create an informed, current, active citizenry armed with the facts. We will be covering what's new to you, what it means to you, what you can do about it, and provide you access to the decision makers when we can. Good afternoon. You're here with Mesa County Compass, and this afternoon we are interviewing Mr. Dave Fishell, who is our local historian for Grand Junction and Mesa County, and Diane Schwenke, who is the head of or a member of
Governmental Affairs.
Governmental Affairs for the Realtors and the Builders Association. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us.
Yep. And Dave, we'll have you start with just a little bit of background about yourself, who you are. We just like to get to know you. We don't know you hardly at all.
Right.
I do mostly Grand Junction, Mesa County history, but a little bit on Western Slope in eastern Utah. I wrote for the Sentinel, did history pieces for them for a while, and did radio history pieces and TV history pieces for quite a few years, and won some awards with the radio. Did an audio guide to Rimrock Drive in the Monument in the 90s, I think it was, and we won a National Park Service award for that.
Wow.
So I'm going to be talking about John Otto at the library in January. Right now, I'm kind of slowing down. I'm starting to lose my hair, so
Well, that'd slow you down for sure.
yeah. But we're working on a couple of projects. One is the 150-250 program, which is going to be coming up in 2026. That's going to be the 150th anniversary of the state. Mm-hmm. We're the only state in the union that has that going for us. And 250th anniversary of the nation. And we're forming a committee to figure out exactly how we're going to celebrate that in Mesa County.
It'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And we are the Centennial State.
Yes, that's right.
Yep. And Diane, you've been on before, but just give us a little recap about yourself.
So I moved to Grand Junction in 1989, and I was the Chamber of Commerce CEO in the community for about 33 years. Retired, failed that miserably, and so now I do governmental affairs advocacy for the Grand Junction Area Realtor Association, as well as the Home Builders of Western Colorado, as we noted earlier, and a couple of other organizations. So just can't get the politics out of my blood.
No, because you had a big governmental affairs when you were at the chamber, too.
Yes,
always advocating for that, too.
That was one of our areas of excellence, and focus was being the voice of business.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, our first topic today, we had Randall Wrights. Am I saying his name right?
Mm-hmm,
Randall Wrights on a week ago, and one of our conversation pieces, he was, of course, advocating for 4th and 5th and the changes that they've made, despite many people in the community, I would say over half, not wanting that at all. And one of the things that he had said was that Operation Foresight was built based on the idea that we needed to be safer and we had bad sewer, but this was the primary reason. Bad sewers, and so they decided that they needed to do this Operation Foresight, and despite the fact that people did not want this either, they went ahead and now everybody loves it. And I pointed out to him in the book that you had, and that wasn't exactly what happened.
Grand Heritage, yes.
Yeah. So Dave, could you start out and tell us a little bit about Operation Foresight as you've done your research?
Sure. We got to go back a little ways before that was even planned to the uranium boom. In the 1940s, excuse me, we had the U.S. government start the Atomic Energy Commission. It had a secret outfit down by the cemetery down on Gunnison, on the Gunnison River, that was gathering leftover tailings from old mines for the uranium. I think some of our uranium was used in the atomic bombs, but that I've seen yes and no on that, but it was used for at least some of the tests. That started to die down a little bit. Then we got into the Cold War, and all of a sudden the Atomic Energy Commission wanted a lot more uranium stockpiled for possible weapons use. And they started to fly over eastern Utah and western Colorado with low-flying planes that would pick up signals of radiation, and then they would give that put that on a map, and you could come down to the AEC compound and find out for free where you might go mine, or prospect, I should say, and possibly mine uranium. It really started to boom in the late 40s, early 1950s. At one point, probably about 1952, 53, 54, we had about 3,000 people a month coming into Grand Junction. There was a full-color Life magazine article, 5-6 pages. It had some airplane shots of the monument, but then it showed mom and dad and 2 kids in hard hats, picks and shovels in front of a World War II Jeep, like you're going out to mine. Well, that was a studio shot in New York City, but it looked pretty good. And people saw that. There were articles in the newspapers. And a couple people, Vernon Pick was one, Charlie Steen was another. They made a few million on their uranium finds over in the Moab and Hanksville area. But one out of, I don't know how to say it, but probably 10,000 made a little bit of money, and nobody except those 2 or 3 guys made millions. But they got a lot of publicity. Our La Corte Hotel, which was at where the convention center is now, that was kind of the unofficial market. I guess you'd go to the basement bar downstairs, and people were buying and selling uranium locations down there. And a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot, but some people got taken. Hard to believe that it would happen. But we know a few times somebody down there would say, "Oh, I got this uranium claim real close to Charlie Steen's My Vita locale over south of Moab, and you can have it for $50,000. Well, by the time that person bought a Jeep, got his equipment, got over to Moab a week or 2 later, and found out it was fake, then came back to Grand Junction, and that, naturally that guy's long gone.
Oh, wow.
But we had quite a few thousand pounds in 55-gallon drums stationed down there. You only needed a few pounds at the most to make a bigger bomb than we used in World War II. And we were only one of 3 stockpiles. The other ones were at Hanford, Washington, and Oak Ridge, Tennessee. So we could have blown up the planet with all the uranium we had sitting around. As we got bigger, and a lot of these newspaper articles talked about Grand Junction, and so a lot of people came here. Moab was number 2, Durango and a few other places were also on the list. More and more people were coming into town, and businesses had not improved. Main Street, or any of the streets actually, had really not improved for decades. There was a lot of sewer and water backup problems on Main. Every time it had a big downpour, there's pictures in the Sentinel from 47, 52, 55 of huge amounts of flood water coming in Main Street. That system had not been improved for, I think, 30, 40 years, for a long time. So we got one picture of a little boy sitting on a fire hydrant watching all the floodwater go by when they had a flood. And the sewer system hadn't been improved for decades either. So people knew things should be improved. And with the new flood of people coming into town, the business was doing pretty good by and large, But by, I got to look at my notes here, 1958, there was so much uranium stored here and other places. The AEC, Atomic Energy Commission, said we're not going to take any more uranium from from new mines. We're only going to take it from existing mines. So if you're going out prospecting, don't go, basically. So by 58, the population boom started to go downhill somewhat, and that started to impact businesses to some degree. The other thing that people don't realize with our great Main Street we have now, or mostly Main Street we have now, is there was no shade. So think about being downtown with no shade,
Right.
none of the parking or sitting benches or anything really nice to attract people. And there are mentions, in the paper, about 102 degrees in the summer, and there's a photo showing about 2 cars on Main Street. Nobody wanted to go down there when it was that temperature. So a lot of things came into play about the time we started to lose the uranium boom, started to lose some population to a small degree, but that really increased into the late 50s and early 60s. People realized, people like, Leland Schmidt was probably the best person to start recognizing the problem. He proposed some different parking arrangements in the late 50s to city council and a couple of different mayors that unfortunately his plans never were established. And by the late, I'm trying to remember, 59, 60, we had gone through 2 different mayors, 2 different planning commissions, 3 or 4 different plans for downtown that were never followed. Other places in the nation had started to see downtowns lose business for new shopping malls. Probably the first place in the nation was Kansas City, Missouri. They had a really great Art Nouveau, is that the right word?
Nouveau.
Shopping center out of downtown that really attracted a lot of people in the late 30s and early 40s. And other towns started to follow that. And a few businesses like Leland and Dale Hollingsworth and a few other people knew that was happening in other towns, and they didn't want to see that happen in Grand Junction.
Right.
Unfortunately, again, plans weren't followed through. Suggestions were made. Dale Hollingsworth with the chamber.
It's important to say he was my predecessor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was a good guy.
Yep, he was.
He hired me to do the book.
And so he made a good guy for sure.
Obviously a good guy. Yeah.
Very smart.
Yeah.
Farsighted.
Anyway, they knew something had to be changed. Preston Walker at the Sentinel started writing editorials about how he didn't want to see downtown go in the direction of some of these other towns in the nation, and said things hadn't been changed for decades, and we really need to start looking at something. And that's kind of where it sat until about 1959, 1960. Finally, after not making much progress with previous city planners and city directors, Joe Lacey, who had been here originally with the Sentinel in the advertising department, he was hired as a city planner. And he was a really good guy. I've talked to Dale, I talked to Leland, talked to several people who worked with him, and everybody talks about what a great guy he was and how he got along with everybody. Even some of the city councilmen that didn't want to change eventually got won over by his plans. So he really started to glue people together and form committees and plans and things like that to get something going downtown. The main person who really came up with the nice existing curves we still have and the shade trees and the benches and everything like that was a regional planning director by the name of Gene Allen. And he said in a Sentinel interview, he was looking out at Main Street one day when it was 101 and noticed the few cars and hardly anybody down there, and realized if we're going to make downtown attractive, we need to do shading, we need to do benches, we need to do something to slow down the traffic so pedestrians are having an easier time crossing the streets and things like that. And he's the main reason why we have most of the existing plans for down there now.
Mm-hmm.
People don't realize that about 70% of that project from 60 to about 1963 was paid by local residents, local businesses. People voted in their own tax plan to pay for that. It didn't come from the state, it didn't come from the feds, it came from people in Grand Junction, businesses, and decided, okay, this is something good, we need to do that. So there's several aspects: better sewer, better water, more safety, more attractions for downtown, better businesses, and everybody kind of pitched in finally after years of not making much progress.
So, quick question. So, was Main Street before just one lane in each direction?
No, it was two.
It was 2 lanes. So it was.
I'm sorry, one lane in each direction.
Right.
Yes,
So you
yeah.
didn't lose traffic lanes.
Right.
No.
When we did that project.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of important. And again, I talked to Dale about this, and Dale was the ultimate scrapbooker. So we had,
Yeah.
I had all of the, and I see the pictures, and the thing that impressed me the most about that project was how everyone got involved.
Yeah.
They got involved in the planning, and there's a saying that if you write the plan, you'll underwrite the plan.
Yeah.
So they were involved in the planning, and then they voted for the taxes to actually get it done.
Yeah.
Which still today is,
Yeah.
I think, the way you get
Yeah.
you really get widespread community acceptance and positive change.
Exactly.
One of the things that impressed me was when I was reviewing this, both Preston Walker and Rex Howell at KREX, who, to put it mildly, didn't see eye to eye.
No.
They both promoted it. Rex had it on TV. Press had it in the Sentinel, and not just once, but numerous times, really pushing it forward. Yeah.
So it was really to benefit the whole community. That's the difference I see between 4th and 5th and the idea of Operation Foresight, is they recognized as a community as a whole, everyone would benefit. You could see how you can have better shopping, it benefits the business. I'm seeing that 4th and 5th is a little bit of let's benefit the bicyclists. Am I misreading that?
No, I think it really does have the more of a singular focus. And again, as the former chamber exec and having conversations with Dale about this, a big part of this, as Dave just mentioned, was how do we help our small businesses? And I would be very surprised if that question came up in any of the discussions about 4th and 5th Street, frankly. I think the thought process was to slow down, which maybe is a valid point going through downtown. But again, I'm not sure all the avenues were explored. I mean, the other thing, listening to you and kind of getting a refresher on it, was various ideas were floated, and various ideas, were dispensed with before we actually got to the plan.
Well, the thing about it is that the community was involved, not just a handful here and a handful there.
Well,
it was the whole community.
And not a creation by city staff.
Yes.
I might mention that not everybody, as the Main Street was torn up, not everybody business-wise was real happy with how that was going, and they had to, or most of them had their back doors kind of refreshed, and that was the main way you came in and out. And so there were some
Which is
complaints.
still in play right now.
Yeah.
Which is nice.
Right.
By the way.
It is nice.
Which again, I
Yeah.
mean, anytime you have construction in front of a business,
yeah.
a business is going to suffer at least temporarily.
Yes.
Absolutely. But again, if you're also looking at summers where you've only got 2 cars downtown,
Yeah.
Right.
and I'm guessing at that point there weren't a lot of bicycles downtown either.
No.
And
You're not
so
riding that-
you don't have customers, then I there's always
Yeah.
issues
yeah,
with
yeah.
that kind of stuff.
And I don't know if you guys have an answer to this, but did this idea come from Downtown Development Authority? And if so, how many people?
Well,
in
first of
downtown?
all, Downtown Authority didn't even exist yet.
No, I didn't mean for that. I meant for 4th and 5th.
For 4th and 5th Street, yes, the DDA, the Downtown Development Authority, was involved in that, and their board was involved in that. There were some adjustments made because of some of what the businesses had said in terms of losing parking and some other things. So there was some in business involvement. There was not widespread business involvement. I
Okay.
think it's fair to say that. But the leadership of the Downtown Development Authority has been involved in the 4th and 5th Street.
Okay.
One thing that I've often wondered about Operation Foresight and going through the photos, you see all this construction going on Main Street and going down for the sewer and the water projects. You can see some of the, I think, 1890s foundations
Right.
on some of the buildings, and often wondered what happened to the artifacts.
Oh yeah.
That was a bit before some of it.
Yeah.
Some of those artifacts wound up in my ex-son-in-law's, shall we say, his sunroom, because he was working on some of that stuff, and every time he came across something really cool, he'd put it up like your little pharmacy bottles and those kind of things.
I know they tore up a lot of the trolley tracks.
Yeah,
It was
right.
Still
Right.
under the pavement.
Right.
Yeah. And that was kind of neat too. Well, I remember, my family grew up here, and I don't remember anybody ever saying, "Oh gosh, this is so awful what they're doing. We hate this." And they were, we went down to Penny's, we went down to Montgomery Ward's, we went down to Sears. It wasn't like it stopped us from shopping because they were doing the improvements. Because I think people as a whole, and I think the readership of the Daily Sentinel was so much wider back then because it was a lot less expensive, and everybody said, "Oh, I understand," because I know my parents would have been the first to go, "Oh, what a terrible idea this is."
Well, yeah, and I tend to agree with you on that, and I think also the shopping patterns were very different. And that's the thing. I mean, when you think back to Project Foresight, it really was Foresight. I mean, it was forward-looking. They won an All-American City Award for it. And again, those judges looked at all of those sorts of things: community acceptance, community involvement, the innovation of the solution. That whole serpentine. I think we started a movement, if I'm not mistaken, with other communities copying us.
Right.
When you look at 4th and 5th Street, they are basically copying some of the models that they've seen in other places, particularly in the West Coast area, Portland area, that kind of thing.
Where the urban density is a lot different than it is here.
Right, right.
Yeah, we had excuse me again. We had a lot of other towns. I don't know if you saw it in the notebooks, but they kept a list of all the different cities all over the nation and even Europe that contacted the chamber. People downtown about how did you do this and how did you pay for it and how's it working out. And then one, I don't remember now. I think it was an English newspaper article. He came over here and visited, and he said, "Oh, it's a dry, barren desert of the Wild West, and nobody lives. But then there's Grand Junction."
That's good. Yeah,
That's perfect.
Well, and it sounds like it wasn't city council driven; it was chamber driven and business driven.
It was definitely a collaboration, and to a certain extent, going back to your point, I mean, Joe Lacey was. You also did have leadership over at City Hall, but it was a collaborative effort, very definitely.
And then when we won the All-American City Award, I don't know, I think it was 10 or 12 people flew to the award banquet in Washington, D.C. To accept the award. Paul Harvey had a segment on it in the radio.
That's right.
You know, a lot of national coverage because of what we were doing. I don't know if we were the very, again, other towns had malls, but we might have been the first one with that curving, you know, idea for the street.
I think we might have been. And again, I talked to, you know, Dale was around when I first got here too. And one of the things he told me, because I had lived in Greeley, now Greeley, Colorado did something very different in terms of they closed off traffic between blocks. And that was kind of the model was you had like 4th and 5th Street would have been wide open, but you wouldn't have been able to get between 4th and 5th Street on your main Street. And that was one of the things that when they were looking for the design for this, they were like, we have to maintain traffic. And I remember him telling me that. And so, you know, as they were looking at this, they were like, here's what we don't want.
Right. Well, and just an aside on that 4th and 5th, when the city council, I don't know that downtown businesses feel that way as much. I know DDA said they did, that when you're coming down off 5th Street, you're not going shopping. Those people are coming from Orchard Mesa to go to work.
Yeah,
so
that's the way I go.
You're not to say we need to slow you down so you'll stop and shop. That's not going to happen when you're going down.
Well, and even if you're, I'm sorry, but even if you're looking at slowing, even if that is the goal, there are other ways to do it. Yes. I mean, we have speed bumps on 1st Street and other places. And I've always wondered why we don't do more with, I mean, there is literally a traffic signal on every block of 4th Street. So if you want to slow them down, don't coordinate them so that you can drive straight through from Grand to Ute without stopping.
Right. Agreed.
So let's move on to Operation Uplift, which you were here for. The idea of what it was, why it was. I like Operation Uplift. I thought that was a good idea.
And honestly, I think, again, that was a idea that was brought forward. There was... particularly with the 7th Street businesses in that corridor, I remember the Enstroms in particular and others, the idea was, again, this is part of our downtown, so let's make it look similar. I mean, we're building off of Project Foresight. And so that was the concept there. And that was where we actually did go from 4 lanes to 2 lanes. And you actually did look at some of the same amenities happening as you see with regard to the trees and the benches and the other things. It's creating the sense of place. So that was the whole concept. Again, businesses were involved. And then, then we come up with the new traffic, because we always come up with new traffic patterns, or maybe they're old, depending if you've been to Europe. But then it was, we're going to do roundabouts downtown. And there was some controversy around that, but that was there actually at that point. That was how we slow traffic down 7th Street, was with the roundabout. And so everything went fine until we get to parking, which parking is just a thorn in everybody's side for every reason. But then it was the idea of, well, if we've got the roundabout and now we're down to the 2 lanes, people need to be able to see when they come out of parking spaces, and we don't want to do the parallel like we tried to do so much of on Main Street. So, and even on Main Street, you'll notice we do not have parallel in most places.
That's a terrible idea.
Right. So we're going to keep the diagonal parking, but we're going to have you back in. And again, that was a case. And Greg Palmer, I don't know if he was mayor at that point. I think he was. And, as soon as they did that, the businesses were like, this is not safe. This is a really bad idea. The public, basically walked away from them. So they weren't even the whole purpose was to get the traffic in there to visit the stores and all of that. And they were avoiding it because they were not going to park there. And we still, in Grand Junction, don't want to have to walk more than about a half a block.
That's true. That's true.
And so it was just a total disaster, frankly. And so great design, wonderful concept, building on Project Foresight, but we had a wrinkle that people on paper it looked great, and in execution it was just not a good idea. And again, it was for safety. That was why they did it. And it became evident fairly quickly that it just was not going to work.
And I don't think it's any less safe to have you backing in. I don't see accidents on 7th Street now that we've gone back to the traditional way of parking. So the safety didn't really happen.
It did. A lot. We use safety as a reason for a lot of things. And again, that was just it. Well, in concept, it was a safety issue. You really couldn't show where you were actually going to be reducing accidents. It was a theory. It was a concept. And so at the end of the day, it was, let's put it back. People are going to not back into diagonal parking spaces.
No.
They're just not going to do it. So we will go back to the traditional way. It works fine. People really like it. For now, we'll see what happens as we look at the redesign of 7th Street.
7th Street, which is coming. But anyway, was that at that time a pilot project, Diane, or was it actually in concrete?
It was in concrete. It was the plan was developed, the plan was vetted, and then the plan was executed. And again, if you look at it, that was a relatively small wrinkle, was the back end parking, because the parking spaces stayed the same, and it was like those signs that said you must back into this parking spot went away.
Yeah.
So, but
and
it was not
repositioned a little.
but it was not a pilot project.
Okay.
And again, that was also, I think, the underlying infrastructure, I should say, also came into play, because again, our downtown is aging, and those pipes underneath needed to be the sewer and the water and all of that. That was also replaced at that time.
Yeah. And if I remember right, a lot of our water was carried in wood, right?
Yeah.
And they had to
If
change those out.
If you know where to look out towards Canna Creek area, there's still a few, maybe I shouldn't make this public. There's a few pieces of wood out there from the wood pipe system that carried water from the Grand Mesa down to the above the cemetery, the waterworks project up there. So, but that was that way for decades, and for longer than people realized. Sewer was just piped into the river by the Fifth Street Bridge. That happened for a long time. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to mention, and it just dawned on me, another reason a small reason for Operation Foresight is there were plans for malls.
Right.
I forgot the gentleman's name. Anyway, at Teller Arms, Dale Luke, he had the property there, which at the time was outside the city limits. And then a couple other people wanted to build something at 12th and Orchard, some kind of mall, which was within the city limits. That got turned down like year after year after year. And then not too long after Teller Arms was planned, and I think actually started to build, that got enclosed into the city. So they had control over that. But they didn't want to have to, compete with them all, even outdoor shopping.
Right, right. With free parking.
I
mean, the free parking has been a huge issue with, like, Mesa Mall.
Yeah.
People said, why would I shop downtown if I can go out here and it's all convenient, it's all in one spot, and it's free parking? And now the parking is so expensive that
$1 an hour.
Yeah.
1980, when the mall opened, that's when we lost, I shouldn't say lost, downtown Pennies and I don't know how many stores.
Quite a few.
Moved to the mall.
chains.
Yeah. It's always in movement, one way or the other.
But then it makes you, then you say this is what downtown's going to be. It's going to be a destination for certain boutique shops and for restaurants, and you're not going to have a Penny's or a Sears or
Right. Well, and the other thing is, again, in terms of downtown, there really have been some people that were very smart. I mean, Dinosaur Journey went in where Penny's was. And so you had a reason to come downtown, even beyond shopping,
Right.
and to actually, do the. I remember doing Dinosaur Journey in there, and you also, you had the effort around the Avalon, so you were looking for ways to bring people downtown that didn't always involve shopping, that gave them a unique experience.
right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and
Which-
I remember you guys on the chamber when you started making the lofts above the buildings for people, because they said if you have people living downtown, it makes it more attractive and it makes it safer, and then you can expand your downtown and it improves the neighborhoods as you move out, like on 8th Street and 9th Street.
Right. The private sector. I didn't have a hammer, but actually, yes, that concept was a great concept to look at. Actually, that was some early efforts to actually do that to some of the second stories. But we did run into some problems because with ADA compliance,
Right.
you have to have an elevator in all of those buildings if you're going to do that. So
Exactly.
there's always a yin and a yang.
Right.
Yeah.
And the heating and the cooling isn't very good in those.
Now we have to figure out the yin and yang for 5th and 6th,
Right.
or 5th
Fourth
and
and
6th.
fifth.
4th and 5th.
Yeah.
And 5th and 6th should be the ones that are the ones, or not 5th and 6th.
Third
6th
and 6th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
4th and
Third and
6th. 3rd
Yeah.
and 6th. Yeah.
Yeah, instead of 4th and 5th.
Yeah,
third
3rd and 6th. I've lost it entirely. I've been on vacation too long.
Yes, you
Anyway.
would. Yes.
But again, that makes some sense when you take a look at, if you look along 3rd, particularly from Grand over, there's not a lot of retail businesses along there.
Right.
And so it's, again, I think there are ways to accommodate. I think we all want to be able to use whatever mode of transportation we want. And if you want to bike or you want to walk, I'm a big walker, you should be able to do it safely. But it's just, it seems like when plans go awry, it's because we didn't set a strong foundation. We didn't actually bring a whole bunch of people together. We didn't actually look at alternatives. We didn't actually do our homework before we ready, fire, aim.
The original town plat, which was roughly 1 square mile from 1st to 12th and north to south, 5th Street and Grand Avenue were designed from day one to be kind of boulevard, but wider than normal streets, to ease traffic in and out, horse carriages in and out. So.
Okay, now moving up. So we've got Operation Uplift. And then one of the other things that he mentioned was the roundabout that we put out on the Redlands, and was taking credit for people didn't really like that. There was a whole bunch of protest, but I don't know how much the city council had any say at all in the roundabout out by the Parkway.
That's on Highway 340, which is a state highway. And that was a CDOT project. It was not a City of Grand Junction project. There was a lot of concern about that initially. Again, part of it had to do with how we had handled roundabouts before. If you look at the first one out there on Horizon and 12, it's like I still see some of those semis try and navigate through there. And so I think our experience with roundabouts had been a bit more limited. So I think that had something to do with it. But again, that was driven by the large increase in population and the traffic. The traffic demanded that you have something there that better than what had been there in the past. And so it was really based upon usage.
Not so much based on how bicycles felt, if they were safe or not.
Right. It wasn't based on, multimodal elements were built into it, but it was really based upon the fact that road was getting so much traffic, and between that and the Redlands Parkway, that something had to be done because of the usage of the vehicles.
Okay, and then your favorite was North Avenue.
My least favorite.
You love North Avenue. You love that
yeah,
street sign.
Well, and this is another case where it was a great idea that really was not a great idea. We thought it was a great idea. So the history behind that was we were looking at the growth of Colorado Mesa University, and we were looking at, frankly, some of the blight along North Avenue. And so probably a fairly small group of us came together and said, what if in other communities the college or the university is located on University Avenue? You think University of Colorado and others. And so what if we rename the street so A, people can find CMU, and B, it might actually attract some new business development because you're on University versus North, which clearly was...
Yeah, but were there...
I know.
No, go ahead and ask it.
No, go for it.
We're probably the only town in the nation that has a North Avenue
And
that runs east and west.
East and west.
I know. Well, it was the north edge of the community, right?
Yeah.
That square mile.
I bring that up with third graders, and I say, okay, if South Avenue was the original south side of the city limits, what would be the north side? And it's almost always a girl that said, oh, was it North Avenue?
So there was historical significance.
Yeah.
But again, it was kind of billed as an economic development thing. And so we started, and I actually had a staff person, God bless him, that went out and started calling on the businesses. And of course, we instantly started to get feedback.
Yeah.
It's like, this is our identity. Our street, we're a brick and mortar store. We're on North Avenue. It's on all of our signage. It's on all of our stationery. It's on, at this point, all of our social media, all of these sorts of things. How long is it going to take Google Maps to catch up with the fact if we make the change? So we proposed it, and there was actually a donation made to the city for the street sign so that it would not cost the taxpayers.
Oh.
Yeah, a couple $100,000
Wow.
was committed. But at the end of the day, what happened with that project, and rightfully so, is I keep talking about the foundation. It was a relatively small group of us. It was an economic development. We heard the feedback from the businesses, and initially we weren't paying attention to it. And then there was actually a group of citizens who's like, I grew up dragging North Ave. I mean, because you couldn't drag Maine anymore. And so it's like, and this means a lot to us. And so at the end of that, what we did, the chamber was kind of the lead for that. And we actually went to the city council and formally asked them to discontinue any plans around that because we heard what people were saying. And that's not what they wanted.
Right.
And sometimes that's the way it should be. And, even though to this day I still personally think it would have been a great idea, again, it wasn't for the community at large. And so we listened to the community at large and we let it go. So
there you are.
The big lesson around the North Avenue name change debacle is, at the end of the day, you need to listen to what people are telling you. And if there is not consensus, if there isn't broad support, you need to take a step back. And you need to, take a hard look at, is this really where we want to be spending our energy at this point in time? Or is there another way to do it? But you got to take a step back when you get that kind of blowback.
Do you think we're going to see that with 4th and 5th? That because what I read from Randall's article was that we don't have the money to make it permanent anyway, and for 7 years. One, is that true? Because it seemed to me like if you're having a pilot project, the other pilot projects they've done have been 12 to 18 months.
Right.
And so this pilot project is 7 years, or is there money and we'll just make you think that we're not going to do anymore, but we're going to move on to 7th Street and start on that? Because if we don't have money to complete this project, how do we have money to start another project?
Well, those are all excellent questions, and I would continue to press City Council. I think it has been fairly widely understood, and what I've heard in meetings is the pilot is 2 years at
Okay.
most. At most. And my understanding is that the Public Works is conducting a study right now of the changes and bringing it back to report back to City Council. So I would be highly doubtful that it's for 7 years. And frankly, if you start a pilot project and you don't have funding identified to do that project, that's poor management. In my book, it's like you don't start something until, you don't start a home remodel until you have a source of money to actually do the
Finish your
remodel.
project.
You may change the colors, you may change the tiles, you may change things, but you're going to finish the work. And so I would be highly suspect that there isn't funding identified to continue the project, finish the project. And again, I've heard 2 years. So, and I think potentially even sooner. I mean, I've heard discussions about making some of those pogo sticks go away and start to put in, rised cement and other
concrete,
things, and
yes.
concrete, and doing it, in 2025. So, again, that one is a huge question mark for me. And again, I can't second guess what the City Council is going to do, but there is an online petition, and that to reverse that. And last time I looked, it was over 2,000 signatures. Now you think about that. If I'm a City Council person, 18,000 people voted in the last city election where 4 of those people were elected. So already 10% have said to you, this is a mistake. That's a loud voice in my book,
It is.
and one that should definitely be listened to. Just even to hit the pause button, something. And God forbid we get a foot of snow anytime this winter, because you won't get to the post office.
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
It's a little bit more profound than the Sustainability and Adaptation Plan, which had 658 yays
Throughout.
throughout.
The city.
I was
The
going to
city-
say 2,000, and most of them you can look online at the petition, and I'm trying to remember it's a very easy to remember where it is right now, but of course I can't.
Change.org.
Change.org. Thank you. You can go to change.org for 4th and 5th, and you can actually look at how many of those signatures, because anyone can sign them. The last time I looked, it was like 95% of them were Mesa County residents that signed it. So it's not the people from the outside. It is people who live here who are saying to the City Council, this is not what we want.
And
So-
I think it's further reaching than just the city itself, too.
Oh, yeah.
The city proper. I think Mesa County figures in on that, especially Fruita, Palisade, Clifton, the outskirts of Grand Junction, because everybody visits downtown, whether it be cafes or whether it be the boutique shops, whether it be the Avalon. It concerns all of us.
Well, and again, when you're talking about, Highway 50 turns into 5th Street. So it's
Absolutely.
also, as Dave mentioned earlier, it's also a commuter route. So yes, it affects a lot of people in Mesa County.
Right. Well, and it affects, like I keep saying over and over and over, I'm not going to ride my bike. I don't think you're going to ride your bike to go grocery shopping from here or from where you live or from where you live or where you live. You can't carry enough. You're not going to take your family to appointments on that. So really the only group I can see that are actually benefiting is the people that live right in that downtown area, very close to that downtown area. And like you've also mentioned, there's no bike riding right on Main Street. And if I am visiting and I like the bikeability, am I bringing my bike with me if I'm going to stay at a bed and breakfast in Grand Junction, or am I going to walk around Grand Junction? I'm probably going to take my car and park and walk around Grand Junction. So to me, I see that the benefit is designed for a very small group right in the center of town. argue with me if you want. I mean, I'm looking, I'm asking.
So, you know what? I honestly, I hate for it to be an us versus them.
Right.
Yeah.
Honestly, because I think that doesn't move the needle forward.
Okay.
And so I want to acknowledge that there is a base potentially growing of people who do like to ride their bicycles and commute to work via bicycles. Or, you know, I mean, we could also get into how Grand Valley Transit navigates around 4th and 5th Street, by the way. That's multimodal, which I don't think had enough attention paid to it when this decision was made.
I agree.
But let's just say that, I mean, we want to be able to accommodate everyone. Then let's back up. This isn't working.
Right.
Just like University Boulevard did not work. Back up. Are there alternatives that you can look at? And to my knowledge right now, there are no alternatives being considered other than we rearrange the poles, we make the lanes a little wider. But I think the from a standpoint of a former chamber exec, I am extremely concerned about the business community in downtown. And that to me should be the number. You know, you got to prioritize, you know, where you are when you're making decisions as a city, and protecting small businesses should absolutely be at the top when it comes to downtown. And I think when you get those 3rd and 4th quarter sales tax figures by region, I think you're going to see an impact on downtown. Because, you know, I've had multiple people tell me, where do you want to go for lunch? Anywhere but downtown. You know, that kind of thing. And again, right now is where for the small businesses along that corridor, 60 to 70% of their annual sales are going to happen in the next 6 weeks.
That's right.
And so if people aren't coming and people aren't buying, we are putting small businesses at risk. So for the sake of argument, I would say let's find a way to accommodate them, but this isn't it.
Right. Okay. And what about 7th Street? How do you feel about that?
We would have to open up that can of worms, right?
So, you know, honestly, first of all, for them to even consider doing something with 7th Street until they figure out 4th and 5th Street, I think is kind of putting the cart before the horse. And frankly, again, 7th Street, we're talking arterial streets that carry traffic that isn't just going to visit Aunt so-and-so who has a 7th Street address in the historic district. And so when I look at 7th Street, there's been a lot of work done, particularly between North and Patterson, that they should just leave alone. And again, as somebody has said, I've read multiple comments on their Engaged GJ. It's like, what isn't working? What truly isn't working? Now, there are accidents in that corridor, and if you look at the the statistics for the last 4 or 5 years, like 95% of them are vehicle on vehicle. They're not vehicle pedestrian. They're not vehicle bicycle. And so when they're looking at potentially, again, cutting capacity on streets, which is what they're talking about, from North Avenue down to Ute, and also from Patterson to Horizon Drive, what's the justification?
Our 2 biggest employers are St. Mary's.
Right.
So you got a lot of traffic that way, and then that's one way to get to the university.
Right.
You know, so that's...
And my guess is that's why they're really not planning to touch the piece from Patterson to North. Because I think those 2 major employers, major destinations in that corridor have already had their say in this. So that part they're not messing with. And it's like, if you're not messing, don't mess with any of it right now.
Yeah, I would think that it would be wiser to put pedestrian walkways over the top.
1965 Daily Sentinel article about how St. Mary's was planning to build a pedestrian bridge from the parking lot over 7th to the hospital. You can see it, you know, it didn't happen.
Right.
But they were talking about it then.
But it's something that would benefit a lot of people and would be a lot safer. But I got told last night, in fact, from my daughter, who is a nurse at St. Mary's, said that they decided they couldn't do that because it would cut out the view. I'm going, what view? They said because it
Over
would cut
7th?
out the books of from the Grand Mesa. Yes, over 7th Street.
Huh?
I have yet to understand that.
Yeah, that's kind
Well,
of
and
strange.
again, and pedestrian bridges are expensive, but so is modifying the streets.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And so it's one of those things where I'm like, do we need to do this right now? And is this the plan? I mean,
Right.
they presented the plan. There is a meeting on Tuesday night, 5:30 at the Arts Center. It's an open house, but I would urge people to go and voice your opinion. You know, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. I think
Yeah, I love that.
You
I
know,
love that
it's
so
like-
much.
so show up. I mean, 277 people have already taken their survey. Over 200 of them said, don't mess with it. They're still messing with it, so they need to hear from you.
We certainly do. Well, I will add one more time that this is going to be the 3rd of December. It will be at the Arts Center on 7th Street and will be from 5:30. And it's an open house, so come and go as you will, but come, please.
Yes.
State your opinion.
Yep.
Right. Well, I'd love to go into like our changes, just real briefly on the homeless situation, just for a couple minutes. Dave, historically, have we seen an increase in homelessness, and what would be your opinion as to what the drivers are from a historical perspective, maybe in how we've dealt with it in the past, or how would
I don't see references to it when I'm researching other topics, and I'm reading microfilm, and reading old Sentinels. Our original paper was the Grand Junction News. There were hobos. They were called hobos that would ride the rails. And unfortunately, some of those guys, were mostly guys, were not treated real well by the railroad cops. But I don't see, and I think there were probably a problem. It just wasn't addressed. I don't think it was put in the papers. Because even then, I don't see a lot of railroad related crime that was least reported. And I think there was, based on other towns of our size, things like that. We, just like crime, I get people asking me, well, we're back in the Wild West, do we have more shootouts, more robberies, more things like that? I don't think it was any worse per capita. So when we had 5,000 people in the 1890s, yeah, we had some crime. We had people breaking into stores on Main Street. I don't think it's any worse now. What's our population now?
70,000.
Yeah. If you count the population versus, how big our police department is, things like that, I don't think it's any worse. It gets we get noticed real quickly. Like the skid, whatever that thing was on, the cops were chasing on 7th, the skid front end loader thing. I saw something on Facebook. I was home at the time, and within 2 hours of the cops chasing that thing down 70, it was on Facebook. So media really, I think, overemphasizes every aspect of crime. That's my thought on crime. Now on homelessness, I think we've had an increase per capita. As the town gets bigger, there's more people. Again, the same way with the crime. I guess I don't know how to compare it because I don't see statistics from 30 years ago or 50 years ago.
Right.
But I know everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot of towns are still, wrestling with it. Delta, I had a friend in Cedar Ridge just tell me how they're, starting to get a few people, up that way. So I don't know what how to solve the problem. As a member of the Historic Preservation Board, I know we're a little concerned about the current location because it's right across the street from that nice Stone Strang's historic grocery store building. And that's that person is kind of given up, I guess is maybe the best way to say it, on trying to renovate that building.
Right.
He's got other problems. There's some foundation problems, things like that. But we're kind of looking at a possible historic district. This is quite a ways away from happening. That would include some of that area and the train station. You know, the train station's on the National Register of Historic Places. So we might have a new historic district county that end of town. With the current center, that would be a problem, trying to get a historic district. And I just saw where they're already talking about a new location. But the gentleman that has the Stone grocery store, he got involved because his wife and his mother-in-law thought it was a nice building.
Right. Well, I actually know who owns that.
Oh, okay.
And he'd already taken the asbestos out of that for $60,000.
Yeah.
So he has an investment in it, but he said it's just not safe.
Yeah.
It's not in a good spot, and he was pretty upset about the whole thing.
Yeah.
So do you agree with Dave?
Yeah, and again, I think pretty much on all counts, frankly. And again,
Well, thanks.
that doesn't happen often. But honestly, we didn't keep the statistics. It was more buried, underneath it. And frankly, as you bring attention to the resources that you have, and this is an extremely giving community, you tend to frankly get a reputation. Just like with the hobos, it's like they knew where to go when they were riding the rails. And so I think we have seen an uptick. I don't think there's much question about that. And again, how you solve it is multifaceted, and I have a lot of gratitude to the nonprofits that attempt to deal with this situation. I'm not sure that as we look at government, other than protecting our public health and safety, what role government should actually have. And when we look at where the Resource Center is today, I mean, here we talk about Project Foresight and Uplift and the investments we're putting in downtown, and then we also put a homeless shelter in the middle of downtown. I mean, again, probably not well thought out in terms of the unintended consequences. So should it be moved? Yes. Should it be changed? Yes. Is it going to solve our problem? No. When
Whitman Park was still used by the homeless population, that really affected the museum. Right across the street, they had people, sleeping on the steps and leaving a lot of stuff around the door when they had to come and open up, and they had to clean up after, everybody. And when I was there in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, we had schools who would come for a tour, especially out of town tours. And they would ask, can we use that park for our kids' lunch? Well, for quite a few years you could. But then since early 2000, maybe, somewhere in there, people from Parachute or Glenwood or Montrose, they did learn eventually not to ask about using the park. But we had to tell them, no, don't go over there with your kids, for third graders, fourth graders, for, a noon sack lunch.
Ruth, do you have anything else either one of you want to share? I mean, because it's true.
We could carry on for another couple of hours, quite frankly, but in order to get this to where everybody will watch it, we need to kind of put a curb on it.
Okay. Well, you've been watching Mesa County Compass. This is the truth as we see it, the facts as we know them. You decide. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
You guys all the time.